or wherever the heck you are, fellow internet denzians. This is the Tech Off Topic podcast, and I am your host, Mike Elsmore. It's been a crazy period for me, and I'm getting back into this podcasting malarkey because you know what? I like doing it and talking to people, especially when zombie apocalypse and I haven't seen anybody in ages, is actually quite fun. So I'm going to add our guest today and let him introduce himself because I think it would be easier than me screwing it up. Say hello.
How you doing, Mike?
Hi.
Hey, long time no see. So, for those that don't know, I'm Marcus Noble. I am a principal DevOps engineer working for Elsevier. My predominant role is working on things Kubernetes, containers, and platform-based stuff. Previously, I've been a JavaScript developer in a previous organizer.js Oxford. These days, it's more Go and Bash scripts for me, so living more in the ops world these days. So, fun times.
That's surprising you didn't say Ruby, because considering Ruby is still one of the defaults for ops scripting.
Oh, it's Python. It's Python for us.
I was just meaning all the configuration tools. For example, there's a level of ops where it just goes from I am a developer to I write YAML with Ruby inserts.
Yeah, so I'm at the point where I write YAML with Go templating. So
the internet has evolved.
Yeah.
No longer using auto-magical Ruby tooling that should have been a Rails app and actually became an internet legend. Here's looking at you, Chef, Puppet, and everything else.
Yeah.
Oh, well. So DevOps principal DevOps engineer. What the heck does that actually mean?
I don't know. So, yeah, I don't like the term DevOps engineer because it's not really a role. It's a kind of way of doing your work. But
as far as I can tell, it's a mentality for getting stuff done.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So like all developers, I say all developers in a multi discipline squad, it should at least try and embrace kind of a DevOps mentality. My role is just called that because it's we're in a big organization. It needs a title. My actual role is really kind of R&D / building tooling for other teams within the organization. So my job really is to make all the devs' lives easier within the org.
Okay, so for those of you who are not aware of the DevOps engineer role or DevOps in general, I would suggest Googling around, think DevOps.com would be a good start because it gives you a lot of the big, broad theory pieces and vendors. And from what Marcus has just described, it's like my job is to find, build, and research tooling to make other developers suck less at shipping code. Not necessarily suck less at building code, just suck less at shipping it.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. And to try and commonalize and remove duplication. I was getting tongue-tied. Yeah.
It's a great way for a podcast when we can't speak.
Yeah. This is going to go swimmingly.
Okay, well, I'm going to avoid asking about the work portion now, purely because I do want to ask about Kubernetes because I'm actually going for a self-learning discovery phase at that bit at the moment. But I actually want to ask you about the home stuff because I have seen the tweets over the last 12 months. I've even asked questions over on Twitter occasionally. So your home infrastructure in your private laboratory space, there is a Kubernetes setup in there. Because I remember there was a post about you because your original Kubernetes setup was built on the Docker engine build, and you had to do the switch from there. I think
I've got to all sorts of switches.
Cool. So you have a lab space where you can actually ship your own stuff to play with.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you have your own lab space? Because I think this is a tinkerer thing.
Yeah. So it's kind of evolved to this sort of point. So for as long as I can remember, really, I've been the sort of person that kind of likes I just say tinkering with these kind of things. And I've had my own personal servers in one form or another. So whether that's, a machine at home, or whether it's VPS on a cheap VPS provider or a cloud provider or whatever, over the years I've had these kinds of evolved. The main reason that I have them is because I like to automate as much of my life as I can, and having, a dedicated platform for me to then go and deploy all these stuff to is fantastic. And the fact that I work on Kubernetes 24/7 at work, sort of thing, it just makes it easier at home to use the same technology, because then I can do what I learn at home, I can use at work, what I learn at work, I can use at home, etc. And the reason that I'm now all Kubernetes based, whereas previously it was kind of just a server with apps installed onto it, it is the whole portability and the self-healing side of things. So like the personal Kubernetes that I've got at home in my local network, I've rebuilt that maybe 4 times now, with minimal kind of interruption. Like I've been able to get everything back at least within a day of me working on it. So the ability that I can then bring all that stuff back and move it around and all that kind of thing is fantastic.
Okay, for a point of reference, you've done 4 rebuilds in how long?
Of a Kubernetes cluster or in general?
Just of the Kubernetes. Oh, because if it's in general, like the Linux box that I have that's been dotted around my apartment is currently off and has been in the cupboard for 4 months. That's been rebuilt, as far as I can tell, about 1 million times in these 7 years that it's been sat there. So how long's that? Because like it's been so easy. I've rebuilt it 4 times. If you only built it last weekend, 4 times is a bad sign.
Yeah. So let's say probably within the last 3 years.
Oh wow, that's like just a decent upgrade window. That's I'm going to spend a weekend just patching the actual OS, upgrade patching the actual engines.
So some of that was actually moving hardware. So I was originally on an old desktop machine. Did that. When the Raspberry Pi 4 was out and had enough grunt to kind of run this kind of thing, I switched to using that with a load of ARM-based stuff. Didn't work out too great. It meant that I had to rebuild a few things as an ARM image rather than not too bad. It got there in the end, but it was a bit of a pain. Main issue with that is I had some stability issues, so it kept just randomly losing connection to the network. It kept stalling and things like that. Probably because I was taxing it too much. I had fairly high CPU usage. It was like 90% odd constantly. So then, I moved it back to a kind of a beefy-ish old desktop machine, and that's what I've currently got. I've also got like cloud-based ones as well and stuff, but they're like managed and.
Yeah, I remember because we're both part of the Civo 100, if I remember correctly.
So yeah, I've got on Civo as well. So I'd use that more as the test playground.
It's my dumping ground for trying rando stuff at the moment because I don't trust it, but it's good enough to try.
It's pretty good. So their K3S offering is brilliant. It's really good. I highly recommend it.
It's just the general outages they seem to have periodically, which is
yeah. So that was what prompted me to move my cloud-based stuff away, and now with Scaleway.
Scaleway, that's a new one on me.
French company. So they've got data centers in France and Amsterdam, I think is where the other one's based. But they've got a managed Kubernetes platform called Capsule with a K, because Kubernetes. They've been great with me so far. Best thing I like about them is they seem to be only like a week behind releasing updates for Kubernetes from like major versions. So like I'm on 120 with them now, I think, and they supported 120. I think it was about a week after it was officially released.
Hang on, so they're keeping really on top of LTS.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
That's
weird. They're really kind of fleshing that out. So they've got like auto upgrade capabilities of your worker nodes and things like that. And yeah, so I recommend it. That's where I've got all my internet-based stuff.
Okay, so if you have a personal lab and you have internet-based stuff because tinkering and you want to be able to access APIs on the internet without, intrusive security holes into your own home network, which is why I'm assuming you have your lab split into some interwebby stuff and local stuff. I may be wrong. Please correct me.
Yeah, but partly that, yeah. So
yeah,
you
I'm
go on.
curious.
Finish your thought.
I'm just curious, like, because I met you through the hackathon scene.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are listening, Marcus is wearing one of the proudest things I ever produced, which is the snapbacks with the hacker branding for Hackfronts. That thing I created, God, what, 3-4 years ago? 4? Gotta be.
Yes, yeah.
And they were in such limited supply that people were trying to chop my bloody hand off for them for the sake of 3 days. But I love them, and I love the hacker scene. It's where I came from. It's where I've met Marcus and people like Callum Hendricks and stuff like it's it's an amazing crowd of people. So what are you playing with on the internet then? Because one of our talking points is something that's not on the internet. Well, it's internet connected, but not. So I'm curious what internety stuff you're playing with.
So quite a lot. So I've gone through a phase the past 2 odd years of trying to move off like big cloud SaaS providers, so trying to de-Google myself and all this kind of thing and go more self-hosted. So I've got a lot of like open source self-hosted alternatives to cloud things. So I've got a Nextcloud on there, just like a Google Drive, Dropbox style alternative file storage. I've got a Matrix and Element set up on there for a chat server for me and my family. I've got my own photos app on there, things like that. So a lot of like, I think, clones of kind of Google or Microsoft or Apple big applications, but then I can own the data myself and I can have more control over it. And it means then that I can also tinker with it some more and tweak it to just my liking. So I've got a lot of that sort of stuff.
Hang on, this. All right, so I've got a talking point in this, which is the evolution of the internet. And you have just, like, in the last 12 minutes, we have gone full circle. So, like, considering we've been engineers about the same length of time, like 13, 14 years. Well, I've been 12. I think you're only a couple of years older than me, so I think it's like that. We're looking at the internet. When shipping code for the internet, it was a box in somebody's data center. It was a shared resource material, and then about 10. And then 10 or so years ago, there was the slew of people selling reseller Xenon racks. Locally hosted, no actual support, but they were cheap.
Yeah, and that's how I got into service.
There was a guy called Carl that I used to have to get on the phone to fix stuff for the company I worked for when stuff went sideways. And Carl was the ND, the tech support. It's like, didn't take long to realize it was a one-man band holding up the entire PR company I was working for initially. Oops.
Yeah.
And then since then, we've gone full cloudy. So we've got AWS, like circa, what was it, 2012, 2013, when they started making inroads?
Yeah, around there, I think.
And then everything else exploded. And then we've gone from having not just compute to APIs out of the wahoo doing all sorts of stuff. And now, in the last 2 years, you're flipping that. You're removing the cloud compute part of it, the AWS, GCP, Azure bit, and going backwards. Why?
Not exactly. So it is still on a cloud. It is, this is all up on my Scaleway cluster, so it is still leveraging their data centers and all that compute power that's available. So I've still got those sort of benefits. All I'm trying to get from this is the whole like privacy and security kind of aspect of it. So rather than giving Google or Amazon or whatever all this huge amounts of data about me or whatever, I get to keep all that myself and have full control over what is effectively my own data. Now, that's not like a I don't go to a whole philosophical level with it. I still have like cloud-based stuff. So I've got like Apple iCloud, and I've got various Google things and all that kind of thing. So it's not like remove this whole thing. It's just that I like to be able to have that sort of control. I've had scenarios. I mean, you've seen the amount of Google services that have been canned over the years. The whole Google graveyard thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been bit by that a few times. So Google Reader, fantastic RSS reader back in the day. I've now gone and built my own reader just for my own purposes, and I've got that self-hosted.
Everybody has, because no other product existed that was like, even I have one. It's a Lambda that does it for me.
Exactly. So it's this kind of thing. So you get the whole guarantee that your stuff, a guarantee, to an extent.
You get things the way you want them.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm very much like to be able to tweak things, and because I change my mind over time, I like to be able to have that ability to change things down the line as well. So being able to have direct access to the code, to the infrastructure, to the stuff underneath, I have that capability.
Okay.
Whether I actually do leverage it or not, yeah.
Okay. So it's not running away from the cloudy internet. It's just having more control over your own cloudy internet.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And talking about control.
It also kind of goes back into the portability aspect that I was talking about.
Portability.
So because I own the data, moving it from that service that I've chosen, that open source product that I've chosen, to another one is theoretically easier, because I've got direct access to the data of some form, and because it's something that I can control, there theoretically is some way that I can get that out easily and put it into another one easily. A good example for that is Git. So I run a Git instance for all my Git repos, which means that I use that. It's got a web interface, so I can interact with it like I do with GitHub or whatever. But under the hood, it's all stored on a persistent drive that I've got control of. And if I ever need to get stuff off of that and move it to another provider, that's not a problem. I've also gone and set up a sync from that Git to every other cloud Git provider, so GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, from my Git so that those repos are then available everywhere for people to contribute to if they so choose. That kind of thing. So it's having that more control over all these sort of aspects.
I was about to ask about that, because there's one thing that's very common with I'm going to do it myself. So people starting to run their entire audio entertainment lives off Plex server sort of thing, and then people go, "Oh, my NAS has died." So is everything that you own. How the heck are you dealing with the redundancy? So with your Git, you literally have it cloned to everything.
All the public stuff, yeah.
Well, yeah, but yes, we only ever talk about the public stuff, because in the private stuff there is code that should be left to die, and the occasional key that should not be allowed on the internet.
Oh no, none of that. None of that.
Oh, I put money in. There's a repo you have probably that's a few years old now where you've accidentally still left a key in there.
It'll be your key if anybody's. It's fine.
That wouldn't surprise me at all, ladies and gentlemen. But okay. So what about the Kubes cluster? Considering you're running not the Kubes cluster, but just the applications you're running, because I'm assuming not everything is Kubernetes. I'm assuming there is some just OS stuff that you have that wasn't worth containerizing.
Nope.
You've containerized everything?
Yeah.
Because not all OSS projects come with a Kubernetes compliant container.
Yeah, you got to get creative. There's not many that I'm running from the open source projects that I've not been able to just either find a Helm package for, so I can just deploy it nice and easily to Kubernetes, or a Docker image already, either from the project itself or from a third party that does just all the stuff that's needed. There's been maybe a couple instances where I've had to kind of tweak it a bit. So there's been a Docker image, but kind of getting persistent configuration in there may not have been possible. So I've done it I've had instances where I've created an init container within Kubernetes that runs just runs a bash image, bash container, and copies that container over to a shared volume between the two containers, and I can then get the persistence that way. So I've done things like that before. I think there was one occasion where I had to kind of build from scratch, but this was back when I was doing it on the Raspberry Pi, so I needed an ARM image, and yeah, it's getting better. I'm hoping that the new Macs with ARM processors and the whole AWS pushing a bunch of ARM processors and stuff is going to improve things, but yeah.
I just hope people aren't going to get lazy and only deploy one or other image. If we're finally entering the realm where licensed hardware means we get to have both advantages of cheap ARM processors for buck tons of cores and Intel processors for hyperthreading, supervisor, etc. Because the multi-threading is not fantastic. But that's the one thing you still want to be able to run, stuff on Intel where you can go, well, thread management, super easy, all the virtual threads. Yeah, I hope they start getting to the point where people are going to just ship like they do with every open source binary. Here is the Mac, the Linux, the Windows binary. Have fun. It's all gone through a Jenkins build.
In Docker, in containers, I shouldn't say Docker. It's kind of nice because you can have these multi-arch images. So you publish an image with a manifest that says, for this architecture, it's this. For this architecture, it's this. So you can still publish a single image, but have it contain multiple architectures. And depending on which architecture is pulling that image down to run on, it will query for that correct built architecture and pull that down.
Okay.
It's quite nice. It's still a little
flaky.
Not flaky. It's a bit involved into building one of these. There's a few steps you kind of have to do because you have to build each architecture image individually and then add them to this manifest and then push it up. But if you use the experimental Docker BuildX functionality, there's a lot of stuff in there that allows you to kind of easily do it, especially if you're using if you're building like Go, where you can do cross architect compilation. It makes it much easier because you can pass into the Docker image what architecture you're wanting to target and build it that way. But for things where you actually need to build on that architecture, it's tricky.
Okay. You still haven't answered the question of redundancy though. How do you make all that stuff? Because from the way you've described it, that's got a lot of personal data, like the stuff that you care about, not necessarily like passport information and all that jazz, but like family photos, because I'm assuming that's where most of the photos of your kids that you've backed up are. How are you backing that stuff up? Like, do you then persist that locally to your home network, or are you duplicating it, or are you following N over 3 rules?
So most of my documents and stuff that I care about is on my Nextcloud installation, which is like a self-hosted self-hosted Dropbox. Dropbox style thing with it's got a bunch of plugins and stuff. You can kind of neat stuff. All my photos go on there, all my documents on there, various kind of things that I want to back up are all onto there. That's all up on Scaleway onto a persistent volume stored there. That's then replicated to my local Mac on my home network through a built-in sync client that it's got.
Okay.
And then also on my phone as well, I can choose the particular directories and stuff to sync. So like the photos are synced, and I've also got like important documents synced. So things that I kind of need to access. So car insurance details for one, I make sure it's synced to my phone. So I've always got access to things like that. So it's kind of replication in that sort of sense. The redundancy is built in to that kind of setup. Some of the other stuff that I've got, YOLO. For most of it, it's not a huge issue if I lose it. Those documents, they're critical, so they're replicated. That's part of the whole package, really. That's one of the reasons you wanted it. And I said photos is in there as well. Things like Git, I've already got them all locally anyway from working on them. They then get all my public ones. Then, like I said, then get replicated to all the GitHub, etc. The only other thing really on there that's an issue if I lose it is my self-hosted Docker registry. It's got all my Docker images. Again, that's on Scaleway on the cloud, so that's actually backed up to an S3 compatible object store that Scaleway have got. So it's not too bad. But if I lose that, all I've got to do is run all the builds again, and they'll get put back. So I've got CI
That's
set
not
up
the
to get
worst
those published.
thing. It's losing a few days of your life, but like,
as long as I get the CI/CD stuff back up, I just got to click some buttons and leave it to do its job.
Okay, so CI/CD, do you run your own on that, or are you running a cloudy one? Oh, please tell me you're not running your own Jenkins.
No, Tekton. So Tekton is a Kubernetes native CI/CD tooling. It's not like Jenkins where it's a kind of ready to go product. It's more building blocks. So if you've come across Jenkins X before, that's actually built on top of Tekton.
Oh.
Yeah. So Tekton kind of provides you with custom resource definitions and stuff in Kubernetes for you to define what a task is, what a pipeline is, what an event listener is, and this kind of thing. And then you can wire those all together. So I've got pipelines set up to kind of build all my applications. So it'll check it out. It'll then run a build, a publish, and all that kind of thing. And then that just kind of all is triggered from my Git instance with webhooks. So every time I push stuff up, it triggers that, and that's all within the same cluster. So it doesn't even need to go out to the internet to trigger it.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so Tekton, I see big things in the future from it. It's already come a long way. So I'm quite a few versions out of date at the moment because of how quick it's been developing. It's still kind of pre-release sort of. It's not. I don't think if I was using Jenkins for everything, I wouldn't drop Jenkins and switch to this like on the get-go. But like at work, for example, we've started using Tekton for PR tasks kind of jobs. So linters, format checkers, things like that. So all these kind of self-contained tasks that you want to run against a pull request, we're doing those all on Tekton because it can be all done individually. Whereas like with Jenkins, you'll often see the whole like pipeline. It is very much a pipeline kind of thing. So you either have to have tons of Jenkins jobs that are all pipelines, and it can get a bit much to manage. Whereas with the Tekton, it's very nice. We can have these individual things, and they all just trigger off. So like I can open a pull request, and then like 5 tasks will start running, and it's go linting, go formatting. It'll check the format of my markdown files, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And that's like I said, that's all building blocks. So you can then extend Tekton to have more. And they've even now on artifacthub.io, you can actually look for Tekton pipelines that other people have built and get them from there as well. So it's very much like coming along and like a community building it sort of thing.
Oh wow, it's starting to sound a lot like the CircleCI orbs process, where they've got the vendor and the community specific ones where they've taken these blocks, the pipelines, and condensed it into a single object use for people to reuse.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. So yeah, so a pipeline is just a resource in Kubernetes. So you like you'd have a deployment resource in Kubernetes or a config map or whatever. A pipeline is just one of these that can then either have inline tasks defined in them, or it can reference other tasks that are themselves resources. So you can have like this reusability and composability as well.
Bloody heck, you really are drinking the complete Kubernetes Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I am a bit.
It's not a bad thing. It's just like, oh wow, literally everything you're playing with and you're building with has a Kubernetes element to it.
Yeah, it's my day job, so yeah,
All right, what about the smart home side of things? Because we've got that as a talking point, and that's something of big interest to me. Yeah. Have you infected IoT with Kubernetes?
Not exactly. No, I haven't got that far, unfortunately. I do leverage my 2 clusters to allow private access to my home IoT stuff while I'm away. So I use a project called Inlets, that allows my home cluster to call my cloud cluster and create a secure connection to only allow then specific traffic through and have it authenticated on the cloud side and all this kind of thing. It's quite nice. So it allows me to access Home Assistant, which is what I run on my. Actually, I run that on a Raspberry Pi at home. That allows me to control all my smart home stuff. So Home Assistant is an open source project that basically allows you to control, automate, manage pretty much any smart device that you could potentially come across. They have like hundreds of different integrations that you can use, like Philips Hue bulbs, all the IKEA stuff, all that sort of stuff. There's capabilities in there for that.
So you've gone down the home. I'm not going to lie, I've been done the lazy route, and I use Alexa for simplicity because just mainly because I started out. I got into the smart home thing through just going, what's the cheapest and laziest way to wire up speakers across my entire apartment? Well, I can go Sonos and be broke, or I can use .2s and get decent speakers in every room of my apartment.
So we've got an Echo in almost every room in the house except for the bathrooms.
I have one in the bathroom.
Is that for when you're soaking in the tub, you want to play a bit of music, you got the candles going?
It's for some odd reason I disliked the fact that I could walk around my entire apartment listening to music that was equalized across the entire thing, and then I walked into a dead room. It's like, this is weird. So I put an old Echo 1 in there. A .1, sorry, not an Echo. That would be a huge waste. But okay, so you've gone down the homebrew route, but you're still using proprietary kit. How are you gluing all that stuff together then?
So with Home Assistant, I actually go with the cloud offering from Nabocasa, which allows you to, which very nicely allows it to expose all your items to Echo. There are other ways of doing it, but I got to a point where I just couldn't be bothered anymore and just pay for that subscription. It allows me then to everything that I've got defined in Home Assistant can then be exposed to my Alexa setup, and then I can decide which I want to actually configure with it and which I don't.
Which means you get to take full advantage of Lex for actual voice activation, because trying to run any of that stuff on a home network is resource intensive, I think is the polite way of putting it. So you take advantage of Lex for doing the actual voice interaction, but everything else is wired, managed, and secured at your end.
Yeah.
Exactly, maybe I should look at that.
Because having the Echoes everywhere is very much gets the family on board with it, because my daughter alone will spend half of her day just talking to Alexa to ask her questions or play music and stuff. So
yeah, maybe I should consider going the Home Assistant route, because I use a crap ton of cheap Chinese electronics. And you can't fault the hardware. The hardware is actually, for the price to performance, is fantastic. Like my office is rigged up with all of the smart lighting is cheap Chinese knockoff. I have Govee, which are, I believe, are they Chinese or Korean? I think they may be Chinese. But RGB light strip behind me, RGB bulb, but they're all made by I'm pretty sure they're the same OEM, but they're all different Chinese distributors. It's like, maybe I should consider Home Assistant as a way of making sure that I know what the heck traffic's going in and out.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of that sort of stuff. So I've got a lot of cheap Chinese Wi-Fi cameras as well that I've got set up around the house for CCTV. So I've got what we call Neos Cam, I think is just what the name is in the UK, and they're like 40 quid mini cameras, like yay big. And the cool thing about those is there's an open source firmware that you can flash to them to get rid of all the Chinese cloud-based communication stuff, so you can run them completely locally. So I use my local cluster at home with a custom-built CCTV application to talk to all of those cameras and pull off over the local network only.
So you've taken a cloud, is it originally essentially Chinese knockoff equivalent to Nest or Blink? flashed it,
yeah.
and turned it into a local IP camera.
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
That's actually really clever. So you get the advantage of because obviously the hardware is always sold cheaper because it's like, they're going to be taking advantage of our cloud subscription services, or we resell your data, or whatever, however they decide to make their money. So you get the cheaper, because when you look at IP cameras, surprisingly, pretty friggin' expensive.
Yeah, so I do have one of the Ubiquiti cameras as well.
Those are fantastic, but bugger me, they hurt financially.
Yeah, so the one that I've got, you can't actually get hold of anymore. It's the, I can't remember what it's called now. It's like the Bullet Mini or something. It's a very nice little device. Stop making them. But yeah, they for the amount that I wanted, yeah, my wallet wasn't happy with that.
You can't fault Ubiquiti. Like their Wi-Fi equipment, their home security stuff is, and the fact that it's all designed so that you can run it against Ubiquiti's own HomeKit or open source HomeKit, but it's designed to run only inside your network. You cannot fault that. Just please stop hurting my wallet. My credit cards can't take this damage.
Yeah, if I had the money, my house would be kitted out completely.
I have been looking at buying a Ubiquiti access point because my old Asus router is, well, it's 8 years old. It's showing its age, considering it's only Wi-Fi AB.
Yeah, I can recommend getting a mesh hotspot set up around the house. That's what I've ended up going with.
Unfortunately, I only live in a 2-bedroom apartment, so I don't need that much. It's more just a case of those old AB networks. It's just like those old AB routers were not designed for the amount of devices I now have connected to it. They were originally designed for about 10 or 15 continuous devices. I think I have about 30 IP devices alone for IoTKit.
My home network's up to 83 devices when I last checked.
Are you running through DHCP or something? Because there's no way you're managing to keep all that alive on the internet.
Yeah. So all my devices on my local network are all uniquely identifiable through a host name that equates to the periodic table. So I've got a few more devices I can get, but there's going to be a limit where I'm going to have to start discovering particles and discovering new elements to be able to name more devices, I think.
I think you've just made most Office IT administrators cry just a little bit. Oh, good. And just think about this, because that's all the active equipment you have on the network.
Just think about not all of it's technically active. So some of it's like maybe tablets that I don't particularly use anymore, or things like that.
I was about to say, of it is the dead hardware on that list as well, because I have my box of dead hardware.
For any dead hardware that's gone, that's got rid of, that's off, taken off the list. This is literally stuff that I could go and reach and make use of. So like a lot of the old, like I've got Raspberry Pis knocking around that aren't currently doing anything, but are ready to go sort of thing for when I need to hack on something.
And he uses the term hack, and it makes me feel so nostalgic. I haven't done a hack project in a while, and I really miss it.
Mate, come on.
It's quite you build stuff most of the time which is useful at home or experimental. I always used to build things that just wanted to make people laugh.
Yeah.
I can't think of any of that stuff to build at home right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I should also point out that Marcus is the man who invented Hack Furnace, or one of 3 people who invented it during the course of one weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, it ended up being like 2 separate websites sprung up, and I was considering wearing my T-shirt as well for this, but I thought that'd be a bit much for you.
My little heart couldn't take that. I'd either cry of joy or shame. Not sure which one. But yeah, just as an FYI, Hack Furnace is a way of taking the piss out Hackference well, not Hackference the event, but directly taking the piss out of me. Like one of them was a Twitter bot which claimed every time I said the last Hackference. Now, I can't remember who built that. I have a sneaky feeling it was you, but I'm not entirely
No,
sure.
no, I don't think that one was me.
It's either you or Pandelis. I'm not entirely sure.
I can't remember.
Either way, but yes. So the trolling is strong, and but Marcus is very well known for building rando stuff. Actually, what was the last random thing you built?
What, Hackfronts or just in general?
In general, like, well, the last Hackfronts is at this point, by the year count, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So, what was the last rando thing you built?
I don't know. I said because of lockdown and stuff, there's been no kind of hack events that I've been to, so I've not really been doing anything at home. So
not even with the 3D printing or like trying to make some weird gimbal for an IoT device that does.
I have just printed yesterday a whole like desk mount thing for my iPhone, watch, and headphones to charge on. Does that count?
Yes. Well, unless you decided to just go and grab an existing image and use it. You did the actual 3D design yourself, then that counts as a hack, in my opinion. That's just an element of hardware.
I have also got a bunch of custom lighting that I've done with little ESP8266.
The little coffee Arduino knockoffs. Ah, yes.
Those you can see on the webcam.
The one, if I remember correctly, those are the ones that are a pain in the butt because they're 3.7 rather than 5 volt.
No, these ones are 5 volts.
Oh, you lucky duck! The last time I had those, they were the same chip, but they were a 3.7 volt.
I think that's the ESP32. I think something like that.
I burnt out about 4 of them before I found out because they cost like 40 pence a. Yeah, I was like, why does this not work whenever I turn it on? Oh, the voltage supply is completely wrong.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I bought a box of them.
Yeah, I had 5 more of them show up this week. So yeah, got a few more to do.
Hang on, a few more. You said, "Oh, I've not built anything recently." You've just got 5 more tiny hackable devices turn up.
Yeah, and a whole strip of RGB addressable lights that I'm gonna, make everything look pretty.
Oh, so you're actually to the point where you're making your own smart home kit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the craziest? What's the craziest or weirdest smart home thing you've built so far? Because you like automating your life. So is it something to automate your life or something to make pretty?
So the thing that I've been working on recently is lighting for my shelves that will kind of shine down onto it and light up the little models that I've got on display. That's pretty. It's a bit boring though. Another thing that I've been trying to make is, do you know what a lithophane display is? So it's
sounds familiar.
Yeah. You have. This is with 3D printers. So you print out like a rectangle and you shine a light behind it, and then an image becomes visible in it based on the depth of the plastic, effectively.
Yes, this is based on old Victorian techniques with the metals and okay, cool, yeah.
So I've been tinkering around with building basically a little light box that has photos around the edge with lights up inside, and is then emulates a Philips Hue bulb, so you can then control it with Alexa.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
applying all of the rando hacky crap to get it together.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the physical side of thing, and you said you were a JavaScript. When I met you first, you were a JavaScript dev. You full stack.
JavaScript dev for years, yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me of T-Bass. Andrew, what's his face? Nodecopter.
Oh yes.
Yes, because he was one of the first full stack Node people in the UK. But this going back 2012, 2013, when Node was still pre an actual version. It was a 0-point release.
Yeah.
And then because not long after that, I then met you, and you were a full stack JavaScript dev, but like the bleeding edge. I think you're the person who introduced me to the Johnny 5 library God, like over 5 years ago. No, yeah, about 6 years ago now.
Even more than that, yeah.
Yeah. So I knew you were always into IoT hacking because Johnny 5, and you're a JavaScript dev building rando stuff that glued web interfaces to actual things.
Yeah.
How was the transition from JavaScript, which is a very organic and, well, shall we say low barrier to entry language, to Go, which is an engineer's language? And by engineers, I mean it was designed by engineers for good computing practices, and you can't get away with doing hacky little things that you can in JavaScript to get the job done.
Yeah, so that I do miss that. So being able to just very quickly spin up a bit of code to test something out is not so much a thing with Go. I think the main thing I struggled with was the being able to have dynamic interfaces, dynamic object interfaces. So like in JavaScript, you can just add new properties to it, to an object on the fly. You can change it to whatever you want. You've got an array here. Yeah, we can change it to an object. We can change it to a number, whatever. I don't care. In Go, it is a strongly typed language, and that going from that transition from JavaScript to Go, that was the first thing that kind of really hit me, because I wanted to do a lot of calling API, calling REST APIs, and then doing something with that data. But to do that, I then had to model the responses that I was going to get as structs, so I can then pass that response into an object to then work with. If that REST API returned dynamic types, if what it returned wasn't a fixed thing, it became tricky. And there are ways you can do it in Go by having just like untyped interfaces and do it like key value kind of thing, but it's built in such a way that is strongly discouraged for good reason, for what the purpose of the language is. But yeah,
using eval in a static language.
Oh.
Eval is highly not recommended in a dynamic language like JavaScript. Use eval. You're a bad human.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, everything you've just heard from Marcus is true, and please do not use eval in your code if it's going into production.
Yeah. Unless it's in a bash file. I've used it in bash file a few times.
Yeah, bash is a different beastie, though.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, bash is both the most evil and most flexible language the planet has ever said. Well, spoken, written, communicated, and something.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So we spoke earlier about the fact that you're a YAML developer with templating techniques around it, but you've also just mentioned bash, and I know for a fact that bash is the DevOps engineer's best friend and their worst nightmare. Which do you prefer, having to get like the emergency? Because there's always, every company, I don't care where you work and how good your business practices are and your software practices, there's always the emergency hotfix. And there will always be the emergency hotfix where something, for some unforeseen reason, has gone Pete Tong, outage in AWS, and you need something to glue two different DCs together because it wasn't originally designed to do that, or something. Do you go to bash scripting or Go scripting to do it?
I think it depends on the environment that it's in. Like if it's in a container, I'll go generally, just because Go suits containers fantastically. If it's something that I need to do on the fly, it'll be bash. Just throw a script together and get it running. If it's somewhere that maybe needs a bit more grunt, I may throw JavaScript out there and do it that way.
You still scripting JavaScript?
Not so well these days. It's my JavaScript is quite appalling these days.
That's fine. That sounds like my Python and my PHP.
Oh, don't get me started on my Python. Oof.
I still claim it's like, I can read Python really easily. Get me to write it. This is going to take a while. All the tabbing, it hurts.
Yeah.
Need brackets. It's also one of the reasons why I'm scared of Go. Where are my brackets? Luckily, there's a plugin.
Brackets? No, sorry, you have braces. You don't have brackets.
Yeah, it's luckily there's a VS Code template which thingy where it like in the linting puts it in there so I could read it correctly as if it was JavaScript. Because I'm still a dirty JavaScript person.
How do you handle all the error handling then? So one of the main things that everybody knows as we go when they first start using it is how there's no exception handling. There is just error objects that you return, and you just return them everywhere. So pretty much every call to a function will likely return an error object and maybe the actual value that it needs. So after every call you're doing, if error is nil, something's gone wrong, let's fix it, sort of thing.
Well, lucky for me, I also spent 2 and a bit years working only in serverless, where you can't do exceptions because you can't handle them correctly. So everything has to be an error object. Catch exception, convert to error, process error, which is dirty, but is the only way when you'll go when you have a little bit of Python, a little bit of mostly JavaScript, and some rando Docker images gluing everything together in AWS. Oh, you need to be able to handle it all in the same way. Fantastic. Which is also the worst thing ever, because having to create error types is so annoying.
Yeah,
Here,
definitely.
also, it's as far as I can tell, maintaining a glossary of custom error types. There doesn't seem to be a nice solution anywhere on the internet for how you maintain this crap. It's most people have got like a Google Doc with it or a Confluence page or something. It's like, who actually remembers to keep that up to date?
Yeah, I've seen a few tools where if you do automatic code doc generation, it can handle it quite nicely. So like in Go, for example, the documentation generation is really nice. It's kind of encouraged heavily by the linter as well. And you can generate then the pages, and I think, if I remember right, error objects can be identified individually.
Yeah.
Or they might just show up as types. I can't remember now off the top of my head. But I've seen some tools like that for JavaScript and stuff that are quite nice as well, where you can specifically identify something as an error, and it then generates a whole page of them that you can refer to. I think that if you're going to go for any sort of solution, that would be the least bad.
There's no good solution, so let's go for the least bad one. Actually, to be fair, that's how I do.
That's 90% of my work, so.
There is no good way. I don't have the time to make one. What's the least bad one for this situation?
Yeah, that's DevOps, right? That's the definition.
Considering I've only spent the last 2 years getting it, so I only started even considering DevOps when in the serverless space, when we started gluing in things that weren't serverless, e.g., things you actually have to operate. It's not just dump code into the ether and let it do. To be fair, Heroku and its ilk of PaaS, fantastic pieces of software, gets the job done, makes you lazy for actually operating it because you rely on the fact they auto restart everything when anything goes wrong.
See, Kubernetes, that's where you got to go. The self-healing side of it is fantastic.
Oh God, I've got to learn about this stuff. You know what I tried doing, and oh God, we're going to actually go to Kubernetes now properly. It's like I'm going to talk about my fails. So over the last 2 years, I've been getting into operations. So originally it was, how do we manage distributed logging across all of our stuff? How do we add all these components which aren't self-healing? We actually have to operate and manage. Okay. Started thinking about DevOps and learning from there. Then I spent the last year talking about observability and how you actually do the data collection side of the DevOps world. And during that phase, it's like, okay, so this thing called Kubernetes, that's not scary at all, with wide eyes and going, oh shit, in the back of my head. And then deciding one day, you know what, I'm going to learn how to use Rancher, because if I go for a complete superset of it, maybe I'll learn Kubernetes along the way. Normally, my way of learning the superset thing and picking up the underlying thing under the hood doesn't work. So I'm still thinking, and this is one of the problems, I need to learn more about Kubernetes right now. Why the heck are you not scared of Kubernetes?
I think I'm too deep. Yeah, I completely get that. So when I first started looking at it, I spent maybe 6 months probably going back and forth investigating it before we actually started making use of it. Like, is that at work as well? And in that time, when we first started looking at it, we were still in a position where we didn't think Docker and containers was the right approach for what we were working on. Slowly changed over time, obviously, and yeah, it took that whole long period to actually understand it, and then actually go for a semi-managed solution. So one of these kind of self-hosted solutions, but where you can have a bunch of stuff set up for you through an installer or whatever, to be able to get it into just into a situation where we could at least run it, and then start understanding bits of it. And the general way that we understood it was it set fire, and we had to work out how to put it out a few times. So yeah, a lot of things have gone wrong, and I've learned how to dig into things a lot that way. I don't know whether I'd recommend that or not, but
luckily I don't have an employer right now, so setting fire to things is fine. It's all experiments.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Okay, so you wouldn't recommend building it, deploying it, and letting it burn in production?
Not in production, I wouldn't know. So a funny incident, we actually had a situation where a production cluster was deleted overnight by a automated Jenkins upgrade process.
I still think Jenkins is evil, so
thankfully everything kept running because it only destroys the control plane, not the worker nodes. So all the instances that actually had the applications on were still there, and as long as nothing went wrong with them, they would continue to be there, and traffic was being routed because it was going through an ALB direct to the EC2 instances in AWS, and that was fine. Just there was no Kubernetes controlling it anymore. Long story short, what happened was Jenkins pulled out an old Terraform state file somehow, went to do an automated update for updating the instances overnight kind of thing, and accidentally rolled back the version of EKS, which is a destructive change. So it destroys and creates, which meant control plane gone. But because it didn't do the worker nodes, they remained. Long story short, brought a new cluster back up and slowly moved the workloads over and switched to DNS. We had, I think in total, maybe it was 15 minutes of intermittent issues in production. That was it. So yeah, okay. learned a fair bit through that process.
Hang on. So overnight script goes wrong. Okay, this happens. Except it's kind of like the junior developer deleting something that's important.
Yeah,
it happens. You accept it and you move on.
It's kind of those scenarios where you go and make some changes to a database and then you notice you're in production. It's that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, everybody's been there and done that. And if they say they haven't, they're lying.
Or it's coming.
Or it's coming, yeah. Oh, yeah. No matter how good you are, this is going to happen. Okay, so that's happened. But in this situation, you've lost all, other than like the actual access to AWS and the actual instances themselves, you've lost all control of the application.
Yeah.
Holy moly, and that crap kept kicking along until you managed to switch over with only 15 minutes of intermittent issues.
Well, thankfully, they've got good applications. If anything had happened to one of those applications and they panicked and threw a termination error or whatever, those applications wouldn't have come back, whereas normally they would have with Kubernetes because it had noticed that something was wrong and recreate it. So thankfully that didn't happen. This was actually over a weekend as well. So this happened on the Sunday, and found out on the Monday, and things were fine.
Oh, thank God you found out on the Monday. Could you imagine it happening on the Friday in 2 days? The risk of a panic from a memory dump or something is probable. It's not possible. It's Jesus. Okay, congratulations to the Elsevier engineers for actually building an application that doesn't suck, and the ops team for noticing and fixing the problem pretty damned quick in that situation.
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay, so even with this, would you recommend people to start learning and playing with Kubernetes now? Considering
Oh yeah, 100%.
home stuff is completely baked into it. Your work is now pretty much completely baked into it. I'm pretty sure there's like, with an organization the size of Elsevier, there is probably some like stuff baked somewhere else. It's like it's not worth transitioning. But like JVM stuff that's like, I will just leave it until it dies and then we'll replace it.
I mean, we have some old blue screen style applications as well knocking around somewhere. So yes.
Yeah, but it's like, so pretty much everything software related from a coding perspective is built on top of, underneath, or around Kubernetes for you.
For me specifically, yes. That's not necessarily the case across the whole organization yet. We're slowly moving in that direction. So what me and my team are working on currently is a kind of a turnkey platform for developers in the organization to use, that's built on top of Kubernetes. So it'd be kind of a centrally managed Kubernetes, if you get what I mean.
I kind of get you, because Logs.io, my previous employer, had something, I believe they called it Apollo, which did the same thing, platform access, so engineers who weren't actually DevOps focused, so didn't have much understanding of Kubernetes beyond images and containers. That's pretty much where their knowledge ended. They could drop the images and deploy them as is. So you're going to just make an Elsevier, is it going to be an open source one or just one that is an internal tool?
It's just going to be internal at this point.
Okay, because
it's basically just built on top of EKS. It's pulling together all the best practices and tooling and stuff that we've already got. Because we've got all these little individual bits that teams are already using, but all in like slightly different ways. They're putting this together with this, rather than, that kind of thing. And we just kind of all bring it together into a unified. Okay, this is the way that it works best. Here you go. Here's the whole thing.
Right, you're essentially making this spaghetti diagram easier to read.
Yeah, and automated. Automate everything.
I'm pretty sure it's a t-shirt somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, I've got to ask then. Homebrew Kubernetes or cloud service? If cloud service, which cloud service?
For learning or for production?
I personally would like to know for the learning. So I know I can roll up a K3S instance or K8s, depending on if I so desire this resource usage. Because K3S is less resource intensive, but also is not a fully featured API set, if I remember correctly.
So K3S is what I'd recommend if you're going to go, testing stuff out locally, if you're like a home lab kind of thing. It's Kubernetes compliant. It's only missing like some of the more fringe features. Nothing that I've ever needed is missing from K3S. So that's what I've previously used on some of my home setups. At the moment, the one I'm running is called Micro Kubernetes, which is available with Ubuntu. The only reason I went for that over K3S is when I was reinstalling Ubuntu, it was an option as part of the installation process. So I was like, yeah, let's try it. So it just handles part of that. I can just do the update to Ubuntu and it handles that as well, which is quite nice. Again, it's just Kubernetes with a few of the fringe stuff taken out. If you were going to go for running production stuff and you didn't have kind of Kubernetes expertise and you wanted that confidence in it working, I'd go for one of the managed providers. So EKS on AWS, AKS with Azure, or whatever Google is called on GCP, I can't remember.
Ironically, where it all started, nobody remembers that one.
Yeah. Also, depending on your use case, a bunch of these have also managed worker nodes that you can leverage as well. So you don't even have to worry about, so if you're in AWS, for example, you don't have to worry about your EC2 instances either. They can all be managed for you and updated and all that kind of thing. So yeah, if you wanted to leverage the features of Kubernetes without needing the full understanding up front, that's the way I'd suggest to go.
Ooh, yeah, because
there obviously is then the cost involved and all that kind of thing, but
yeah, but it's last time I was looking at EKS, I scared myself off and decided to use. It's the reason I ended up using Civo for a while. Originally, was because I was going, well, I've got an R&D budget on AWS. It's hooked up to Ocado. It's got a hard limit. It's fine. Let's play there. Have you seen the amount of CloudFormation for running EKS manually with EC2 nodes? The amount of it's all CloudFormation because Terraform. You then it then essentially has to compile into CloudFormation to execute on your behalf. So
Terraform goes against the API rather than CloudFormation. So we use Terraform for a lot of stuff at work.
Because last time I was looking at it, it's like CloudFormation. It's like the amount of CloudFormation to configure the security group, to configure just to build it, to get a single node. I was looking at somewhere about 100 and something lines of CloudFormation.
Jeez. So Terraform, I can tell you now. Yeah, the way the Terraform works is under the hood. It just uses the Go libraries, the AWS Go libraries, and interacts with things that way. So it'll call the EKS APIs, for example, and say, create cluster and that kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay. Just processing in my head, like, no, I think I'm just 3S and actually no. Micro. You said Micro Kubernetes was the name of the
Micro K8s.
Micro K8s.
Yeah.
My Docker, my little Ubuntu box is, shall we say, old. I think it's running 14.08. It's kind of old. Like I believe the current version of Ubuntu is 20 or 21.
Something like 20, I think. Not sure.
Yeah, the last major one was 20. It's about time I updated it. Maybe I should just install that as well and then play. That's got nothing else to do at the moment. Unemployment is called fun for a reason. Okay. Okay. Let's go with a homebrew rather than think. So, if ladies and gentlemen,
the alternative option.
Pub.
So the alternative option is if you are just looking to hack around very quickly on something, there's a project called Kind, K-I-N-D, which is Kubernetes in Docker, which allows you to spin up kind of a Kubernetes installation in a Docker image on your machine to then interact with and kind of test out ideas. It's really good for like CI/CD style things where you need to spin up a Kubernetes cluster to test something out and then get rid of it again. But if you are just trying to like work out how something works and not want to worry about destroying an existing setup, just spinning up a throwawayable cluster in a Docker image is perfect for that.
Okay. One, I love the naming convention, but my brain is trying to deal with the containerception going on with that. You have a containers being orchestrated by a container inside of a container.
Just wait till you then deploy something onto that Kind cluster that builds another Docker image, and
my brain can't process, and I'll just start drooling like I've just been in the electric chair.
Yeah. There's some much smarter people than me build these kind of things, and
it's weird. I consider myself to be not dumb. I then look at that stuff and go, I'm not that smart. Well, okay. Right. I have kept you chatting for well over an hour on this one. So, thank you very much, Marcus. Right. For those of you wanting to find Marcus on the internet and badger him, heckle him, say hi from the internet to him. He is Marcus_Noble_ on Twitter, and Average Marcus pretty much everywhere else. And I believe it's recorded, and essentially a more concise and better structured version of this conversation did come out of, is it JS Oxford, you said?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to go find that, find JS Oxford, and you will find this talk, essentially this conversation in a more structured talk format for you to actually dissect and learn from, rather than ramblings of two nerds.
There was some rambling as well.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Ramble. The question is, did the entire talk come down to Kubernetes all the things?
The talk was how it was presented from my Kubernetes clusters, if that helps. So the slides that I was using were on my cloud provider.
Oh, I don't know if that's amazing, if that's Inception, or if that's bloody awful. Either way, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Marcus.